Hey guys, Oscar here for Notagrouch.com, and as I told you before, I was going to interview somebody about cryptocurrency, and this is Steve Cole. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Happy to. Yeah. So most of my background is in web technology. I worked for Silicon Valley startups doing software engineering work and managing teams for the better part of a decade. Since 2013, I've been a Bitcoiner. So investing in Bitcoin, and then since about 2016 or so, investing in Bitcoin startups in the space. Pretty passionate about Bitcoin as money, the economics of Bitcoin, and really focused on three key areas. So education, helping people understand what it is, why it might be a big deal. Long-term investing, kind of responsible long-term investing, and privacy. So the ability to be as private as you want to be with your money and your financial sovereignty.
Okay. So obviously you had a bit of a technical background prior to this, and as do I, but it's still very, very sophisticated technology, even for a techie to understand. Like, I've been reading, and I'm starting to understand what's happening, but I tend to get caught up in all the other, I don't know if it's nuance or minutia, whatever you want to call it, like the interplanetary file system, and like what is that? How does that relate to the whole, what do you call it, the crypto world, and what else can we do to it? Because there's all these features and things that happen to come with coins. Now you're mostly focused on Bitcoin.
That's right.
And that's what the group is about. The OC?
Yeah, so we've got a recently launched meetup group here in Orange County. It's called the OC Bitcoin Network.
Okay.
And it was born, as we mentioned in John's video, out of a desire to get something that is really Bitcoin centric.
Sure.
So there were a lot of cryptocurrency meetups, there were a lot of blockchain technology meetups, and I tend to think that those are a little bit overhyped in my opinion. Like, there might be some value there, but I don't think it's as much as the hype tends to get. And then Bitcoin tends to be less well understood or appreciated and kind of underhyped in general, in my opinion.
Okay. Even though it's the most popular, right? I mean,
it is the most popular. It's got the highest market capitalization, the most liquidity, so it's certainly the market leader. But I think, especially in the enterprise setting, there's a desire to really, try to put the word blockchain on everything. Right.
Everything's blockchain now.
Yeah.
So.
Kind of similar to what happened with the term cloud computing or like AI, deep learning. If a company can say that they're dabbling in that, then they can really hype up their brand.
Right, they get buzz and maybe more investment.
Yeah. And so the term kind of gets diluted, like the quality of the term kind of gets diluted over time.
So what is the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency? Is there a difference?
There is a difference. So the concept of a blockchain was really born with Bitcoin. So in 2009, when Bitcoin was launched, it basically, one of the components under the hood that technically powers it and makes it work is this data structure called a blockchain. And so Bitcoin's blockchain was the first, but then there have been many other currencies that have been created since then, and numerous blockchains around the world. And a blockchain can kind of be thought of as a marriage of databases and networks. And there are trade-offs, so it's certainly not optimal for some use cases. Like, if you want to do things very, very quickly, like low latency transactions, probably don't want a blockchain for it, because it's very slow. You need to wait for this global consensus to kind of occur.
Kind of like checks and balances that take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. But the blockchain is what you will most typically see under the hood of most digital assets and digital currencies.
All right, so that's essentially the difference, and I understand that. So do you feel like that's one of the obstacles for mass adoption? Like, if I go buy something I want to pay with Bitcoin, I can't, that seems to take a long time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there something happening for that to be more, like, faster?
Yeah, every day it gets a little more usable, and I don't think that Bitcoin's, like the core software for Bitcoin, needs to change much in order for mass adoption to occur, but I do think that companies building products on top of Bitcoin need a while to just make that user experience more friendly, more accessible to people. So if you think about the early days of the internet, right, when email was first created, it required a lot of technical know-how to log into a command line and use this obscure software to like get an email from point A to point B. And now my mom can use Gmail, you know? Google has kind of built this beautiful layer on top, and so we can just pull out our phones and send email. And Bitcoin is starting to get there, but it's still pretty early in terms of it's only existed for a decade, and the first part of that decade was just pretty raw, right? Like you had to be kind of technical in order to be successful and safe in investing in this. But every day that user experience continues to improve.
So you think eventually I will be able to pay for our coffee with like my card or my phone, tap my phone, and somehow there may be a middleman or an app that's layer in between my wallet and that transaction, but that will satisfy the merchant to say, yeah, I don't have to wait. Even a minute is long for a merchant.
Yep.
So they want things to happen within like 10, 20 seconds. Like, hey, run it, good. So that's happening right now. Or there's more opportunity for. It's basically a whole industry that can be born out of there, right?
Yeah, I'd say there are really two big facets to that, or two big points to talk about. So the first is, yes, I am optimistic that will be how the world looks someday. You'll walk into a coffee shop and Bitcoin will just kind of be the default option to pay with, and it'll be low latency. There are technologies that already exist and are usable today for that. They're still in their early stages as well. So the Lightning Network is a very promising example that a lot of people are excited about.
The Lightning Network?
Lightning Network.
Lightning.
Yep.
Okay.
And you can think of that as a layer on top of Bitcoin. So rather than needing to wait for all of the confirmations and that slow process of confirming a transaction to occur, you can kind of think of Bitcoin as this settlement layer. And then this higher layer of Lightning allows for potentially mini, low latency, cheap transactions, and then you just settle the final balance at the very end over some period of time with a genuine Bitcoin transaction. So that's kind of one, but I think the other thing that I'm even more excited about for mass adoption of Bitcoin is not so much what it will take to make Bitcoin successful as a payment technology, but a shift in awareness of everyone in the world about Bitcoin as a savings technology. So a lot of people, when they think about money, they think about walking out, like buying something, paying for things, and that's certainly part of money. But a bigger part of it that people aren't even as conscious of is savings. So when you go to sleep at night, you expect that when you wake up the next morning, the number in your bank account is going to be able to purchase approximately as much as it was the day before, right? Your purchasing power isn't going to go up or down overnight, and so Bitcoin, I think, really the killer use case for Bitcoin today is as a savings technology. I used to go out of my way to spend Bitcoin, and in some cases I still do to support merchants, but I think the best way to use it right now is to save money and to try to
literally just
to hoard Bitcoin. These are scarce and precious, and no one can ever create more than 21 million Bitcoin. And so if you can kind of accumulate some, then you know that it won't be the value won't be diluted via inflation, as might be the case with dollars.
All right. Is that scarcity, is that what, or that pushed all the altcoins to kind of sprout everywhere? Is that like, oh, well, that one only has 21 million, but ours has 50 million? Or do you think that's the main reason why altcoins are coming up? Or why do you think the altcoins are there when Bitcoin is as good as, like an evangelist like you would say? Like, why do altcoins exist? What's the purpose?
Yeah, why do altcoins exist? For a number of reasons. I think in many cases they exist because it's lucrative to create them. So if you are the founder of a new altcoin and you can convince people that it's worth investing in and spending money on, you can potentially make a lot of money for yourself. And I think a lot of the thousands of altcoins that exist were probably just driven by profit motive for the people creating them. I think that they range from very interesting technical experiments to, on the opposite end of that spectrum, just outright scams.
Cash grabs.
Yeah, it's very much the Wild
and
West.
we've seen quite a few of the past few years, like ICOs that are just straight up scams, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
but I think that the biggest advantage that Bitcoin has over them, in my mind, is that it's the one that's hardest to change. And it's kind of funny because when you hear that for the first time, that seems like a bad thing. Like you kind of associate, especially in the world of the internet, with the ability to move fast and make changes as a good thing, right? So Facebook's mantra, like move fast, break things. And there are some coins like Ethereum that very rapidly roll out new features and things of that nature. But Bitcoin has kind of taken this more conservative approach, and it really values the immutability of its monetary policy.
Okay.
So that 21 million coin limit and the schedule at which new coins are created, that is virtually impossible to change. And all of the other coins, that's less the case. There's
Sure.
often a small centralized group of people who control it, either
Right.
developers or a centralized group of miners,
Sure.
or even in some cases a literal company with a CEO who kind of has authority to do so. And there's no CEO of Bitcoin. There's no single influential enough person who can exert influence and coerce the system into changing.
Okay. And we still don't know who Satoshi is, right?
That's right. It remains a great mystery.
There was that guy, that Australian guy that came up with like a couple years ago. Said, this is the guy, but
the only thing we're 100% sure of is that it's not that guy.
Right.
It could be
We know that it's
anybody
not
else.
that guy. Right.
Definitely not that guy. Yeah.
Obviously, you gave some tips to John as to like where to get started, and the other, well, there's two main barriers I see my friends and people I tell about, that when they see these barriers, that like that's game over for them. Like, no, I'm not interested. One of them is, of course, what's it backed by? So we know, obviously, you already answered that. The other one is, how do we get people to get past that? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but past this psychological thing, like, how am I going to buy $10,000 worth of this and only going to get 0.0001 or whatever it may be worth at the time? It's very, very hard for somebody to just wrap their minds around it. Or like when you go to buy a coffee, like the amount it's outrageous how it's written. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
do you think that's ever going to be fixed somehow with maybe another layer, another business in between that says, hey, I don't know. I mean, that's psychologically, that's hard for people to even get into. Well, I want to learn more about it. When they see, oh, you only have 0.025, like,
Right.
They equate that to dollars.
You want to own a whole one or something, right?
Like, how come you don't have 2 or 3 or something? Right.
Yeah, you're right. And I think there's two kind of misunderstandings or barriers that need to be overcome there. And the first is the one we talked about in John's video earlier, which is the more simple one of just understanding that it's possible to divide a Bitcoin up and that you can really own a fraction of one. A lot of people don't even know that. So even though it costs $10,000 for one approximately today, you can buy $5 worth just fine, and you'll own a fraction of a Bitcoin. But once you know that, then there's the psychological barrier to overcome of wanting to feel like you own an entire unit of something.
Like something significant.
Yep. And so one thing that I'm really optimistic about is this shift that's already starting to occur in the units that are discussed when thinking about Bitcoin. So initially it made sense to just speak in terms of Bitcoin because Bitcoin was so cheap.
Sure.
But as it becomes more valuable, it'll be increasingly rare to own an entire Bitcoin.
Right.
And so now people are starting to price things in Satoshis or sats for short.
Oh, okay. Kind of like dollars, pennies.
Exactly, yeah.
Sure.
And so like it's a lot easier to think, oh, well, I'm going to, pay $1 and get thousands of sats.
Sure.
And that can potentially, like, that just sounds and feels very different.
It does. And that, I think that's actually the solution. Yeah, if I go to Starbucks and they're accepting Bitcoin and it says, this is 400 Satoshi, that's a lot easier to understand that that's like 0.0004 or whatever.
Totally. And already some apps in the Bitcoin space are starting to use those units in their like in-app experience or to offer a toggle so that you can kind of view it in one or the other. And I think as Bitcoin hopefully becomes more valuable in the future, then that will only become more prevalent.
That makes a lot more sense. So yeah, like giving those a name rather than, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the understanding too, that like because Bitcoin is so rare, like there are only 21 million, just mathematically, it's going to be very rare if Bitcoin continues to rise in value to meet someone who owns an entire Bitcoin. Like we'll probably have a word for that. We'll probably call them whole coiners, and they'll be like, oh wow, you met a whole coiner today? Someone who owns a whole Bitcoin? I think the stats are, there's roughly 38 million people worldwide who have a net worth of $1 million US or more. Okay. And there's only 21 million Bitcoin. So like even just that, there's not enough for every millionaire today to have a whole coin. Like that is simply impossible.
And then and a lot of them are just hesitant to even get into it.
Yeah.
Which leads me back to something I heard at your meetup from a few people, and I wonder if you also resonate with that same advice. Somebody said, do whatever you can to get your first Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a solid advice?
Definitely, yeah. And don't put too much in. Don't put an amount in that will stress you out if
Sure.
it drops by 40% the next day.
Okay.
But just get a little bit of skin in the game, and
Sure.
it kind of gets you over that hurdle. And you can see it, and it's tangible, and you can
Sure.
watch it rise or fall in value.
Okay.
And then, to whatever extent you're comfy, you can just keep averaging in from there.
Try to get at least one, and then maybe build upon that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Um,
Start stacking sats.
Sure. I'm on my way there. I have about a quarter one and a lost half Bitcoin. I'll tell you guys about that later. But
Sad
Steve, where
story.
can we hear more about you?
I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Twitter?
So twitter.com/sthenc, STHENC.
Okay.
It's my Twitter account, and I post about Bitcoin a lot on there.
Sure.
And in Orange County, we've got the recently launched meetup, just released the rest of our 2019 schedule, so we're going to be meeting monthly, and got some pretty exciting stuff in store.
All right, cool. And so I'll put all the links down below. Thanks, Steve, for coming out and just basically answering some of our questions. I think a lot of people would appreciate it because all the stuff that you just told me, it's taken me months to learn about, and even then I still, like the Satoshi thing,
Yeah.
that just clicked. That was perfect. So
Awesome.
thanks
yeah.
a lot, appreciate it.
Happy to chat, Oscar.
And
Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you. So go check out the link below, and we'll see you guys next time.